Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Scott Masson, leading you through this discussion of the fourth installment of the Rings of Power. This episode is subtitled The Great Wave, and that is the dominant symbol that is used throughout the entire episode. It's the leitmotif, as it were. It begins the story where we actually are in Numenor with Queen Regent Muriel and a number of women and babies, and she is blessing them. And in the midst of that happy scene, sees the white tree, Nimloth, which is in the midst of the city, the petals of that tree blowing towards her, which are a sign and symbol of the tears of the Valar, we've already been told. So it's a portent of doom, and we see that is the case because shortly thereafter a great tsunami comes and destroys the Kingdom of Numenor. But of course, at this point, this is not reality, but rather a foreshadowing of what we know will happen to the city of Numenor, which again Tolkien makes clear as a sort of an analogy to the lost city of Atlantis. But here it is nothing but a very bad dream. She wakes from it, and we find ourselves in the court of Muriel and Pharazôn and the intrigues that are going on there. Now, remember last time I said that there are two factions there, those that call themselves the King's Men, those who happen to be reigning here, and these are the men who have turned away from the Elves. And then there are those who are the faithful, and the faithful here have found themselves out of power for whatever reason, and the reason is, and we find this being revealed later on by Muriel, that her father, Tar Palantir, declared a strong allegiance to the Elves and thought that they should repair the ruins of their relationship, for which reason he was imprisoned and kept from power. And now we have the figure of Pharazôn apparently in power. And there are various signs throughout this episode that Pharazôn is very much of a demagogue and uses political savvy to keep the men of the city of Numenor, or the Kingdom of Numenor, on his side. And we will see that playing out here in, as I say, various ways. All sorts of subplots here. There are three main plot lines. There's the Numenorians here. We have the return to Arondir and the Southerners. So two plot lines here. One of the Western Kingdom of Numenor, then the Southlanders, and then finally we return to the Dwarves. Thankfully, we are spared the travails of having to endure the Harfeet, at least for this episode. We'll return to them, no doubt, later on. And the importance of that plot line will hopefully become clear to us. No doubt it has to do with their strange visitor, who I think everyone is suspecting is Gandalf by this point. But the Queen and Queen Regent, rather, Muriel, confronts Galadriel, angry as ever, foolish as ever, and quite frankly, unappealing as ever, lacking any sense of wisdom, certainly no sense of politic speech, full of sound and fury, is very forthright in her opinions, and gets herself imprisoned, for which we don't feel particularly sorry even. This is one of my great laments about the whole series, is that it seems to me that the characters lack any substance or depth, certainly no resemblance to the characters that we read about in Tolkien's works. The dialogue is insipid and often lacking in any gravitas whatsoever. But above all, the whoever is the screenwriter for this seems not to love the characters. There's a lack of love of the material, and this is the chief failing of this work in my mind thus far, is that although we have boxes to tick in terms of plot design, it is very rudimentary, and it lacks the real depth that we find is the very thing that makes Tolkien so attractive to so many. And then we can just talk about the meandering plot and the multiplicity of characters that we get no real attachment to. And I've just set aside the woke politics and the way in which the lore has been destroyed at this point. It is really the lack of real care, it seems to me, at any rate at this stage, for the characters on behalf of the screenwriters. They give us no reason why we ought to care or like these people, and it seems to be only residing in the fact that we recognize their names and like them from other contexts, but it is building on the substance of that, and as the series progresses, there's increasingly fewer reasons why we ought to care. And that's incredibly sad, because we will meet the great Isildur and Elendil here, and Galadriel, and various other figures that are obviously famous in their own right, and certainly of importance to the story of the Lord of the Rings proper. But I said three plot lines. There is the northern or the western kingdom of Numenor. There's the southerners, which are going to be the place where Sauron comes to power. We've already seen that in the sign, the symbol that is burnt on the map. We can see that the plan is for the southern kingdom to be inhabited by none other than Sauron. And then finally we get the plotline of the dwarves, where we pick it up. By this point, some time has elapsed, and the dwarves are building Celebrimbor's new tower. We see a brief vista of that, and I will, for those who missed that, it looks quite frankly almost like an absolute copy of Peter Bruegel's The Tower of Babel. Look it up. Look up The Tower of Babel by Bruegel, and you will see exactly that is what is being symbolized by Celebrimbor's new tower, which is to forge rings of power. And so some obvious and probably pretty unsubtle references to pride and hubris here amongst Elrond and Celebrimbor. So folly being presented amongst the dwarves and the elves, even in their alliance. Folly amongst the and political intrigue in the court of Numenor, and then finally amongst the Southerners, we return. Remember the last time we saw the Southerners, Arandir had been captured, trying to escape, and now we see him facing a new figure. Now this figure is a disfigured elf, or at least he has the ears of an elf, and his name is Adar, revered by the orcs there, for which reason many people suspect that he is Sauron, but at this point we're not quite so sure that that is the case. Is he Sauron? Is he some sort of corrupted elf that has been drawn over to Sauron's employ? Is he? I even read in the chat on is he Maglor? Is he a son of Feanor, about whose death we know little? At this point, it's rather unclear. From the homage that's paid to him, he does rather seem like Sauron. He is present in the southern kingdom, and so at least it seems plausible that this is none other than Sauron. On the other hand, he doesn't quite seem strong enough, and to see him in the guise of simply a disfigured, scarred elf, not so sure. The other suggestion, which has been made in various quarters, is that Sauron is coming in the guise of this figure of Halbrand, This seems to me rather implausible as a plot design, but the plot design's been meandering and rather all over the place anyway, so it's entirely possible. The main reason for this conjecture is the way in which he seeks to manipulate and use power, or rather use other people through politic means. He has the wiles of a politician himself. He seems to manipulate others in that way. He even suggests to Galadriel that what she needs to do, and this is when Arondir and Galadriel are in prison together, he suggests to her that she needs to find out what her opponent most fears and then give them a way of mastering it so that you can master them, which is exactly what Sauron himself will do in creating the Rings of Power to extend life to the mortals. Remember, the men are born mortal, whereas the elves are immortal. So what do the men fear most? Well, it is actually death. So it is a way of solving your opponent's greatest problem. Give them a means to do this. So some suggest that Halbrand himself is Sauron for that reason. I think it's improbable for other reasons of plot design, but among others, he is present here in Numenor, and he is far removed from this other implement, which seems to be betokening Sauron's presence, which is this sword that, let's go back to the Southern Kingdom, this, again, rather dislikable character, boy Theo, and his idiot friend who we pick up going back to the village to get food because, don't you know, the Southerners lack food and need to go out for it. He goes back to the village where the orcs were to get the food that he knows is there, and of course gets captured, at which point he pulls out this sword, which seems to have this shadowy blade, and of course that shadowy blade also burns a sigil into his very forearm. Actually, one of the creepy scenes is that a man, an old man who presumably possessed this sword before, has a similar brand in his forearm. This is what one gets when one wields this sword of Sauron, is a sort of mark in one's arm, but also within their soul. So they've been turned over to the dark side. They haven't quite had the shard of one of these Morgul blades stuck into them like Frodo does in The Lord of the Rings, but it has a different sort of operation on them. And so we're left wondering what these two will do. Again, further along the lines of plot implausibility, Theo's mother, Bronwyn, now seems to be in leadership of the Southerners for reasons that rather escape me, but simply in keeping with the plot design we see throughout the entirety of the Rings of Power, that women are in power. I guess it's because she killed an orc. Okay. So she is now in leadership there, and the men who are sniveling, cowardly, and thoroughly dislikable now listen to her. At any rate, when Adar releases Arondir, the Sylvan elf, he does so with duplicitous means. He's there to send the message to the Southerners that either they should capitulate or be destroyed. I would have thought that message were already clear because their villages are being destroyed by orcs already. And I guess capitulation is something that they don't know they could have. So he's been sent there to do that. Why he would do that is rather unclear to me. Maybe it's to save Bronwyn because he loves her. But that doesn't come out in the plot. It really is unclear that that is his motive. And again, this is part of the faulty plot design, the portraits of characters, is that we don't really see what they love. There's not sufficient there for us to love them or want them to do well. So I mentioned that as far as the three plot strands here. In the third, there is some element of intrigue and interest insofar as we go back and see Elrond and Durin in alliance, and the elves and the dwarves working to build Celebrimbor's new tower, as I say, a sort of Tower of Babel. But we also find that beneath that Tower of Babel, while they are digging, they have discovered something new. And the Disa, Durin's wife, doesn't want to tell him the truth about this for reasons that are not entirely clear to me. But they've discovered something new in the depths of the earth, which the reader finds out is nothing other than Mithril. And there are all sorts of, again, ominous signs here. There's a shaking, an earthquake of sorts, something like a parallel to the tidal wave up in Numenor. There's an earthquake beneath the earth, perhaps betokening the awakening of a Balrog. We know that that will be the case based on the Lord of the Rings. But all of these signs of doom and omens of betokening doom are there on the horizon. But the plot returns to its beginning point when we conclude with the Queen Regent, Miriel, having previously imprisoned Galadriel and refused to agree to fight with Galadriel in an alliance between elves and men against Sauron, who's rising in the south. Having assented to her will, not because she sees the wisdom in it, but rather because Galadriel escapes from prison, and another sort of ninja, superhero, female elf defeating of the guards runs up, finds Miriel with her father, Tar Palantir. Behind him, a sword that looks an awful lot like Narsil, the sword that Aragorn wields. And it discovers for the first time that he is there because he so loved the elves. And but she still refuses to ally herself to Galadriel, and it's only when we see in a full courtly scene the white leaves of Nimloth, this the white tree fashioned in the image of Telperion, blowing into the court. And of course, at that point, the terrible dream with which the Queen Regent begins the episode now seems to be coming to pass rather quickly. And so she changes her mind and decides that she will go along with Galadriel to fight against Sauron, who is rising in the south. Asks for people who will go with her, and of course, at that point, we get Isildur and his two teenage, dislikable characters who are going to throw themselves in with him to join them as well. So the three novices are now about to join this plot line, and we will see what comes of that. As I say, and the most important thing, and this seemed to me rather interesting as well and rather well done, we discover that Tar Palantir possesses a Palantir, one of the 7 Palantiri crafted by Feanor, and she sees a vision of Numenor being destroyed by the tsunami, the very vision that with which the Queen Regent Miriel began the whole episode. She sees that, and it sort of frays out from that like an exploded piece of glass. And so all sense of fulfilled prophecy coming to pass here, and a sense of the overarching design, a sense of foretelling the future, all of which is rather well done in a superficial sense, but again without the love of the character on behalf of those crafting the character. They just simply don't take sufficient time working on character. They're more concerned with visuals, which are stunning, but quite frankly not sufficient reason to watch it. I think there's lots more that could be said, but that should suffice us for these weeks. This week, there are lots of other commentators out this. That's my addition here. I hope you found it helpful. Once again, please, if you do find it helpful, please like and subscribe to my channel, and I shall see you next time. Thank you.